My name is Philippa Hardman, and I'm one of the co-founders of GameShift. So this is one of our series of approximately monthly pop-up events, and we're really delighted to have GameShift's research fellow, John Higgins, who has brilliantly yet again introduced us to a really interesting person, Mini Kobal, who is in southern Turkey. And just when we were speaking a few minutes ago, she said, it's quite cold in Turkey. But what cold in Turkey means that it's actually what those of us in the UK are calling actually pretty warm, possibly even hot. So it's just different perspectives, but we're really delighted to see the two of you, and Minnie in particular. Welcome, and thank you, John, again for introducing someone with such an intriguing title that we're going to talk about Socrates, why Socrates would make a terrific Ned. So all I'm going to do is hand over John, to you and Minnie, and Rick, ask that you spotlight them.
Right. Well, welcome everybody. Given that we're a sort of a nice-sized group, I'll also, sort of as Minnie and I are in conversation, certainly to begin with, do pop comments and questions into the chat. And actually, because it's a small enough number, do wave your hand as well, and we can begin to get into more conversational. And again, if you're happy to then be recorded asking questions, that of course brings it to life differently. So I'll be keeping a track on that in order that Mine can really concentrate on sharing her insights and perspective. I'm going to start with Mine and I are going to talk about how we got to know each other. From my world in West London down to hers in southern Turkey. These meetings do not happen by accident. And we got to know each other through a mutual friend. Yeah, he is a friend and a colleague, Alper Utku. Now, I got to know Alper when he was doing his doctorate, and he was struggling to integrate his Sufi practice into his organizational consulting practice, as everybody does. Of course, you want to have a deep theological, poetic tradition as part of how you engage with running a business. And so the two of us have often had this philosophical bent in our conversations. And then he introduced me to Mine, and it was a very fortuitous one because I was working with Megan in our own research into spaciousness at the time. And on one of the walks I did with Megan while we were trying to get our heads around what this word meant, Megan then turned to me and said, "This is a philosophical issue," at which my heart sank, as I thought, making this thing intelligible to the world was already hard enough without acknowledging that this was basically a question around how we know the world, what we pay attention into the world, and what moral compass we're bringing into the world. And then Alper said, "Oh, I've got this colleague, Mine. She's working with boards and bringing Socrates and things into it." I'm thinking, brilliant. And how on earth is she doing it? But before we crash into that, Mine, what's your feeling of your memory of how we got to meet each other?
I think that's a great question to start with, and thanks a lot for asking. But to be honest, I do not have a clear-cut answer for this question, but I can think out loud. I'm working with Alper almost for 10 years, and I think he connected us because of my writings, and especially I think one of my articles was so critical from his perspective, the one I explored Foucault. And I tried to invite Foucault to our boardrooms. And the concept was power, how we perceive power, how power is experienced in organizations. And what is the source of power, I was asking. Does the power comes from position, or does power comes from the expertise, the authenticity? And do we today really need powerful leaders, or do we need leaders who can empower others? That was the big question of my article. And Alper brought another dimension to that discussion. And as you may guess, he just brought the concept of love based on Adam Kahne's work. And how we can find a balance between power and love. That was the question of my discussion with Alper. Too much power and less love could be too mechanical and too oppressive. And too much love without power, then we gonna all struggle how we can get things done. That was the discussion, and I think the interplay between love, power, Foucault, philosophy, leadership, and that will let Alper to connect us. But this is my personal opinion. But after this discussion, I think we have to ask Alper
That's
for a more accurate
immediately.
answer.
I love that we're already crashing into love and power, and I just again thinking in any human connection, any human relationship, to pay attention to those two things.
Yeah.
And the way that we ignore them and disappear them is extraordinary. I remember writing something a few years ago where I said, "Isn't it interesting how love, ambition, lust, hatred are referred to within organizational world as pink and fluffy issues?"
Yes, so romantic and so.
And rather than saying this is the very stuff of human life and human energy. But just to step back from love, power, and Foucault for a moment. So my understanding is that you started off with quite a traditional sort of versing in management disciplines, organizational disciplines. What led you to actually bring philosophical disciplines into your work? So so that you wrote about love and power and Foucault and didn't just stay with how to grow your market share.
Yeah. Actually, I have to make, I think at this point, a small confession, but this is not a secret, of course. I do not have a formal training in philosophy. I'm just a curious, lifelong learner, I think, and I want to understand the concepts and the relationship between these concepts. And for that, I'm reading, I'm writing, I'm sharing, just to be able make sense of what's going on. And not having a formal training in philosophy give me a space to say, I don't know. And this is a good luxury. And I want to use it more often. And as you mentioned, I'm working as a consultant. That means I'm visiting C-level executives, senior leaders, and I'm trying to understand their issues. And then I am designing and delivering end-to-end leadership culture programs. And almost 5 or 6 years ago, before pandemic, I realized something. I think that was so obvious, profound, but that was my aha moment at that time. Most of the leaders, they were rising very similar issues. I mean, growth, innovation, engagement, team alignment, sustainability. Of course, we are all living on the same planet, and to some extent, I understand the sameness, but it's too much, the sameness. And instead of proposing a very conventional leadership development suggestion, I started to ask why, and why is the magical question. And after a couple of why questions, I think I found a missing piece that was curiosity. And think about a leader who is really curious about his teammates, or think about a customer facing role. He is really curious about his clients. And then they gonna ask more deeper question. They want to understand what's going on, and just they start to smell the context. And then the philosophy, curiosity led me to the philosophy, and I want to get some inspirations from philosophers. Philosophers are the people who ask better questions. And the key point is not finding good answers. It's all about the quality of questions we ask. This is how I try to link philosophy and business. But I know in business life, we all appreciate shortcuts and answers. But instead of rushing to answers, maybe we have to revisit our questions. How can we be sure that we are asking the right questions? And this is my starting point at that time. And then I start to think about the questions. I mean, the ontological questions. What exists? What is engagement? Do we really understand the same thing? What is innovation? What is growth? And from different perspectives, I want to dive deep. And at the second phase, I want to create a space for epistemological questions. How do we get the knowledge? How we think about the evidence? How do we say, okay, this is the right way of thinking? And all these kind of questions. And so philosophy is all about how we think. It is not about what we think. And this is a dilemma, I know, but I think philosophy is the antidote for sameness. And this is what we think, what we need in today's dynamics. This is how I start. And by trying to ask better questions. And another point that I want to integrate philosophy and business life, not to fall in love with our ideas. And again, I would like to bring the concept of space here, trying to have a healthy space, healthy distance between ourselves and our ideas. And this gives us a great opportunity to critical thinking and also learning how to listen each other. That's in a nutshell. I try to integrate, but I'm still trying, by the way.
And this is, what you had the courage to do is something I've often tiptoed around the edge of, which is I was going back to your, asking the obvious question of what do you mean by engagement? What do you mean by growth? How did you land those questions? Because you can almost, particularly if you're, an academic or a consultant, to dare to be naive and not to want to display cleverness. I'm just projecting my own stuff onto you at this point. But how do you land those obvious questions, those simple questions, in a way that people take seriously, rather than want to say, oh, for goodness sake, surely everybody knows?
I got the inspiration from the philosophers, and the credit goes to being able to say, I don't know. Let's think about Socrates, let's say, and this is the title of this discussion also. What we know from Socrates, actually we don't know whether there were a guy in ancient Greek world named Socrates. We just know him from Platon's writings. But there are two premises of Socrates, the way he built these dialogues. One is irony. There is always a room for humor. And the second one is meiotic. And most probably his mom was a midwife, and he witnessed too many births. And that's why being a wise and ignorant man, and he is asking all these questions with a beginner's mind. And there are three questions I love to use from Socratic perspective: what we know, what we don't know, and what we know, do we think we know? These three basic questions, and you can ask these questions to your team members, to your management team, to your clients, to your competitors. What do you know about your competitors? What do you know about your clients? What do you don't know about your clients? These are very simple and very powerful questions, and they're gonna open a new perspective, a new door. And the critical part, and this part I think we need to practice, the second questions, the third questions, and how we build dialogues. I'm working with Alper, and we are working at Management Center Turkey, and we love to say companies are made of dialogues. And when in most meetings, what I observe, instead of having a dialogue there, we have a couple of monologues. I say something and you answer without interrupting me. Okay. Even you can have an eye contact, but the area for improvement is building thoughts based on what we have heard. Otherwise, we will have a pile of thoughts, so many monologues. And for being able to have a quality dialogue, we have to listen, and I have to link something yet that you have said, and then ask another question. And so we can have a meaningful, tasteful conversation. This is what I suggest to invite to boardrooms so we can learn how to embrace uncertainty. Maybe it could be an answer also to your question. We all navigate uncertainty, and we don't know how to live with that uncertainty. This is not tolerating, this is not ignoring, this is just how to state uncertainty as a starting point. And uncertainty, okay, means anxiety, and as a nature, we want to know, we are seeking for clarity. This is what Aristotle says 2,000, 2,500 years ago. We want to know, but we couldn't know what tomorrow brings, what next year gonna bring. But how can we turn this anxiety to a growth opportunity? By asking questions, by asking very basic questions. And this is a solid and more safe foundation, I think. Wow, I love frozen chickens.
Shall I just explain what that is? Because it was
Yeah,
a perfect Minnie, if that's okay. It's your point about people being in meetings but having monologues, not dialogues. And Chris always describes it as throwing a frozen chicken. So I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and you're expecting that I say it, and then you're going to throw your frozen chicken, and that sense of nothing moves because everything is just frozen. I'm going to say my thing, I'm not really listening, and you're going to hear what you're expecting to hear, so not getting that curiosity. So just that, and it just felt like your sort of lovely image to go with your series of monologues. But he often talks about meetings being just places where people go to throw frozen chickens.
Exactly. I love frozen chickens. I'm gonna use it. Thank you.
I mean, I was going to link this back, and what was going through as you're describing, and now we've got this board of people with their, they're throwing their frozen chickens at each other, is linking it back to power and love.
Yeah.
As you framed it, this is your entry into this conversation, your entry framing in your paper. Because part of it, I'm just thinking about within the dialogue movement, as I first experienced it back in the late 1990s, you know, power got disappeared. It was the idea that we'd all turn up in some sort of, you know, lovely group setting, and you know, we could just share away, and we could unburden ourselves and be open. How do you, while at the same time inviting people into curiosity, working with your 3 questions, how do you at the same time acknowledge and work with patterns of habits of power? And almost how do you invite people into a more loving connection with each other?
Good question. I think this is all about awareness and all about mindsets, maybe. At that point, there are 2 different mindsets. I'm just talking with a reference of James Carr's or Simon Sinek make this concept more popular. Finite mindset and infinite mindset. How leaders define the game we play. If we have leaders in that boardroom with finite mindset, we couldn't move, I think, a little bit further because they are more short-sighted and they are all dealing with short-term numbers, figures, growth ratios, and the big question is what's in it for me? But when we somehow achieve to move to the infinite mindset, then the big question gonna also change. That at that point, we want to understand the relationships and our impact and how everything is more interrelated. And we have to care our people, our employees, we have to care our clients, our suppliers, the community, the future generations. And within this mindset, then the people will be more open to discuss the balance between power and love. And this is not a static game at the same time. There is always a flux, what we have learned from Heraclitus. In some scenarios, maybe power could be a primary answer for our issues, but next day, maybe we have to prioritize love. And how we play with these 2 big players and how we are open to be new perspectives, that's the part. Do we have a finite mindset or do we have a infinite mindset?
I just intrigued as you're talking
Huh?
about
Yes, I've got it here.
stepping into the infinite mindset, because I spent the weekend reading a friend's draft of his book on existentialism.
Ah,
And to me, part of the infinite mindset, that lifting of art, invites you to engage with aspects of your experience which can be deeply unsettling.
yeah.
It is that one has to embrace one's mortality. One has to embrace one's lack of power in the world. And so how do you invite people into that infinite mindset while still enabling them to have a sense of agency?
I just can promise, just highlighting new possibilities. I'm not promising answers. I'm not, or the philosophers, let's say. My value proposition is not solving their problems. I just promise new perspectives, new questions, and maybe but the critical point is how we can integrate philosophy with their real challenges. when they struggle with resilience, I can invite Marcus Aurelius maybe. How can we enhance their inner strength or resilience, how they evaluate what's going on there? Or if the issue is innovation, maybe we can have some inspiration from Nietzsche, the duality and the power, as Nietzsche used, let me say, he got his inspiration at that time from ancient Greek tragedies, the challenge between Apollon and Dionysos. Apollon represents the order, the common sense, and Dionysos represents the boldness and god of wine. But they are both gods, they are both so powerful. But in today's dynamics, we just glorify the values associated with Apollon, and the Dionysos got the secondary prioritization. But when we bring both of them on the table, and when we challenge the status quo, and the boldness comes from the Nietzsche altogether, and we will see what these discussions will lead us. Being open to this uncertainty, being open to new possibilities. And I don't want to promise just leaving the meeting, just leaving the workshops with a solid action plans. Just the questions. That's my promise. Leaving the workshop or leaving the discussion just with more questions, not the answers.
Two of those things are such a fundamental reframe from me, and particularly for those of us who have a relationship with an OD world, is that shift from I am not offering, I'm not here to solve problems, I'm here to help you see new possibilities. That is such a reframe for me. And also that the purpose of this conversation is to leave with new questions, not with new actions. And again, that is such a fundamental shift.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I'm now going to segue into one of our, and I'm keeping an eye on the time, and we'll be inviting people to put some questions in shortly. But you know, I'm looking at our question number 5, and I think this is relevant, sure. Which is what philosophy has to do with the application of AI. Good. Now, to me, that is the segue, is that you know, if you're offering AI solutions, that's the wrong philosophical framing. If you're offering more actions around it, what we need is an understanding of possibilities and questions. Could you tell me more about, you know, where you've got to on what philosophy has to do with the application of AI?
We are trying to shift, at least in my perspective, in my influence area. That's what I'm trying to do. Just this is a shift from competing to contributing. And AI, let's start, since we are talking about philosophy, just start with the word. We call it artificial intelligence. I have also some pain with this definition. Why we are calling it artificial? As human beings, we tend to think we are the one and only creatures on this world with an intelligence that's natural. All other forms of intelligence are artificial. And we all know animals have some intelligence, even insects have some intelligence. And the intelligence, what we call today artificial intelligence, I think it is a silicon intelligence, it is machine intelligence, but this is not artificial. And this is a sign of our higher ego, I think, as a human being, and we call it artificial, and our intelligence is natural one. And this is not something discussable, but since we are talking about philosophy, I want to also highlight that point. And how we use artificial intelligence. Most probably, we see artificial intelligence, AI, as a tool. that makes everything faster or process all data more fast, more efficient, more accurate. That's okay. But data belongs to past. And curiosity, but we need also a human touch. And curiosity is all about future. And artificial intelligence, at least for today, needs a prompt. And maybe in a couple of years, all these notes that we are talking right now will be also outdated. But a 5-year, 4-year-old kid could ask, this is an actual question my son asked me when he was 4 years old. Why is water so wet? And an artificial intelligence without a prompt couldn't ask this question. Artificial intelligence couldn't wonder, couldn't be curious, or couldn't lie. As human beings, we can lie. This is our superpower, curiosity. There is a quote from Kierkegaard. He said, we understand life backwards, connecting dots backwards, but we live it forward. And this is what artificial intelligence do today, connecting the dots backwards, but more fast, more accurate. But this is a source of intelligence. And my question to the board, to the C-level executives, what kind of intelligence we are outsourcing to AI? And what do we choose to keep for ourselves? What is the human touch here? And how do we collaborate with AI? This is another source of intelligence. There is a famous, as far as I know, at least famous in Turkey philosopher, Iona Kuchuradi, a Turkish lady. And in one of her interviews, she said something like that. And I would give a reference to her. In today's world, we are trying to make human more mechanic, more rational. And on the other hand, we want to create robots, more feelings, more. We want to humanize robots at the same time. And this could be something wrong. We have to be humans as feelings, as with curiosity, with wonders, with anxiety, all these human features. And we can also have robots. But why we are trying to make robots more human and why we are trying to make ourselves more mechanical. And this is, we have to learn how to collaborate with AI. And that's my answer, I think, in a nutshell.
Okay, I love that. I mean, that I love that just again that we're back to curiosity as that theme. And again, that's if I was looking at the thing that's standing out for me as you're talking is that's the red thread right from the start. It's provoking that, stimulating that curiosity in us. And often we shut it down because it takes us into new possibilities it doesn't fit. From a process point of view, I'm just going to ask you our last question before opening up. And Rick, I'm going to ask you that you sort of unspotlight the two of us, not quite yet, but shortly, so that we can move into a hands-up conversation as well as running on the thing. So while people think of questions they'd like to ask or things they'd like to just join in the conversation, I'm going to ask Mine what I usually tear my hair out when I get asked this and get very uppity and say, how can you be so reductionist? And my insights cannot be boiled down to a to-do list. But you know, the last question I've got on my my prompt list for us was, what are your top tips for bringing philosophy to life in the workplace?
Okay. First of all, I would like start to prioritizing questions over answers. It's all about how we think, not what we think, as I said before. And just trying to embrace uncertainty in that case. And the second one, as you mentioned, we have to position our curiosity as a superpower and also as a shield, so we can keep ourselves all these human related attributes and not
I've
failing.
given her Nurofen.
Sorry, that's okay. That was just Megan just unfortunately popped in.
Also not falling in love with our ideas, keeping a space between ourselves and our ideas. Okay, we can glorify curiosity, but by saying not falling in love with our ideas, we need also invite another partner to the table, which is humility, intellectual humility. I mean, with curiosity. I can ask curious questions, that's okay. But whenever you bring a critical point of view, whenever you criticize my idea, you are not criticizing myself, just the idea. That's the space part. And that means intellectual humility. At the same time, I have to be open, different perspectives, different ideas. And this is how can we maybe find a balance between love and power too. Just being open to different perspectives. We don't have to choose one side. We have to bring different perspectives, different ideas, even the opposites. And we have to learn how to deal with the opposite ideas at the same time. And this is the possibilities. This is the philosophy. And having fun also could be another note. This is the whole process. There is no end. Since we all believe that we are playing an infinite game, everything what we experience, this is not winning, this is not losing, just learning. And maybe the last thing I wanna highlight, this is not a solo game. This is the game that we are playing all together. And the question, what's in it for me, I think it belongs to the old world. We have to care what's in it all for us. I mean, we are responsible for the planet. We are responsible for the next generations, and the playground, the influence area of the leaders of the corporate world is, I mean, huge. That's why this is the responsibility of leaders. They have to play with their curiosity. They are responsible to flourish their own curiosity, and leaders, C-level executives, they have to create safe area in their playgrounds for the whole stakeholders just to flourish curiosity and new perspectives, new questions. And we have to embrace this uncertainty altogether. Maybe this could be some of my highlights.
That's one of the things you echoed in me, and then I'm going to pause and give you a chance to, because you've been talking for a lot for the last 3/4 of an hour, and give you a chance to take a breather and invite other people to say what's resonated as much as anything. But I'll kick off just by saying what really linked up there was I was interviewing a senior executive earlier this week, and he talked about how he tries to avoid using the word high performance with people. He says it's one of the most freezing phrases he knows, because it locks people into I've got to achieve. And he says what he tries to promote is a high learning culture. And I was just associating the high performing, it almost takes you into the finite game, because
Yeah.
in order to perform well, I've got to know the rules. I've got to know how to perform well in this exam.
Yeah.
The high learning is I'm not attached
Yeah.
to what the rules of the game are, because I'm willing to embrace new rules, new ways of knowing. And so to me, that shift from actually the high performance locks you into that finite game.
This is exactly what we are discussing while having a psychological safety on the table. Labeling is disabling. Whenever you say a high performer, it's also a kind of labeling. And this is gonna lead to fixed mindset, not growth mindset. Yeah.